I am NetMoverSitan. It is now time for the flaw realization law, specifically of the flaw of technological sciences. Yes, it is Yesod's turn to deal with Angela. It was at this point when Angela and Roland went to the floor of technological sciences, as it was time for Yesod to give his report, which was a compilation of the city's technologies. He's been able to gather a sizable amount of information on the city's technological aspects, W Corp's true singularity being one of them. Roland considers him one of the best at dealing with books and information of the librarians. Yeah, I can't really argue with that, as he clearly doesn't like to leave a job half-finished. Yesod also agrees with that, as he's fond of doing that, and has been doing that for some time, even before the facility. Before he was a brain in a robot's body. Roland also noted that he likes keeping stuff neat and tidy, something that Roland is utter at doing. Well, it helps in this case that Yesod has OCD, at least partially. Angela noted how proud Roland is of being a total slob. Yeah, Roland, as usual, doesn't give a about that and wanted to know what Yesod thought about these technologies. Let's see. Considering L Corp's singularity involved creating eldritch monsters in order to produce power, and W Corp's singularity, which we've covered during the Warp Train story arc, his ability to view all aspects in a positive light is about as likely as being killed by having a foam ball thrown directly at your head by a pitcher of a professional baseball team. As he mentions W Corp putting people on a train where those within it are driven mad with torment for a few millennia due to time ceasing to exist. Ooh. That'd be like being forced to listen to a radio station that only plays songs. Then they erase the memories through their true singularity, material restoration, which hides the nasty truth of their convenient service. It's unlikely to get any better with the other wings. As Yesod went on to speak of the technologies of the city, focusing on creating definite results, and wiping the process, or more specifically the morally questionable at best aspects of it, on their and flushing it away. The library is no different as far as Yesod was concerned, which is why he conducted additional analysis on the library and what it did. Angela considered this pointless. Yesod continued regardless. He went on to say that the library's interior changed according to one's perception. Or, to put it simply, the mental state of the librarians is reflected in the physical space. which is why the sceneries of the outside are recreated inside the library. The library also expands as more books are added to it, which suggests that the library is bigger on the inside. Great. All we need now is a mad space hobo that picks up strays with no particular destination to travel to. Anyway, the power of the books can also be physically manifested in the library. Okay, where the are the wizards and witches? Don't worry, Hogwarts hasn't moved to Korea. Yesod saw the invitation as a compass that helped Angela to narrow down the books to what she needed, which also served as a catalyst that amplified emotions. So he's figured that out, more or less on his own, as she said something similar about that. He could go on about the technologies of the library, which Roland considered amazing just based on what he's heard, and also what he's seen so far. Angela considered them works of art that she made with care. Yesod couldn't possibly fathom the inner workings of all the technologies. Their operation doesn't appear to be based on the application of multiple singularities either, which shows specific usage and limited efficiency for how advanced they are. He had a hypothesis to explain it, that the library itself is a miniature universe, where anything is possible as long as its objective is to expand the library. A small world of its own, with its own set of laws and principles. Well, that would at least explain how Angela was able to teleport to different parts of it. Yesod asked if this was accurate. Angela didn't answer him, telling him to believe what he wants about the library, believing that all they needed were the results. That confirms Yesod's suspicions about the technologies of the city, based on an earlier conversation with Roland. Yesod didn't agree with her, as based on that conversation he had with Roland, which was also true here, there was no technology in that world, or at least not in that city, that doesn't have a price, and I'm not talking about the price in material wealth. Angela couldn't care less about that. I didn't approve of him idling away his time thinking about this. Telling him that his work is to study and categorize books and knowledge relating to the city's technologies. He agreed with that, and that he was following the rules that she ordered him to follow. However, he saw it as a contradiction to bind themselves to the principles given to them, and failed to see beyond that. Or to put it another way, he looked past his own job description. Then Angela spoke in a slightly resentful tone. Well, resentful enough to have it picked up by anyone watching. That it must be nice to be himself, to give the rules the finger and break free from them. She said this much to Roland's fear, as he knew what was happening. Then we have a flashback to when Angela had just started in her role in the facility within Lobotomy Corporation HQ, which was an energy company and wing supplying the city with the energy extracted from abnormalities, creatures originating from humans. This energy produced by the physical and psychological pain of those that worked on them. She had orders that she couldn't understand nor refuse. Orders that made her question if it was necessary to go that far to collect energy. Ayin remained silent, which Angela interpreted as, "Shut up and follow your orders without question." On loop 0, as in when it first started, she hears an employee having problems with weird things crawling over their body. That sounds like the naked nest or the spider-bud spawn. Angela questioned why she couldn't help that person, even though they were in pain. It was too painful for her to watch. Quite the difference from how she is now, isn't she? Then we get to loop 29, where she observed an employee screaming for the door to be shut due to an abnormality coming for them. They were begging for this. Angela considered doing this, as it wasn't too late. She could save them if she did this. Unfortunately, she didn't, as it's what must happen. It's the principles that she had to follow, regardless of her own personal desires. She had to prioritize energy production above all. And the best way to do that is to give humans a painful death. Yeah. Her hands were tied. By the time she got to loop 287, Angela asked if humans are nothing more than ingredients to Ayin in that ever-repeating play. Not literally. Ayin wasn't from District 23, at least as far as we're aware. It's unclear where he came from. She questioned if he truly wanted to save humanity, questioning the price of that salvation, a price that he should pay for a ticket to escape from that hell. Yeah, she sounded more mentally disturbed by this point. And for good reasons. During loop 3217, she observed an employee's arm melting painfully. I don't think that sounds like melting love. All Angela did was apologize for not being able to help. All she could do was watch. When we get to loop 18,231, it's not gone better. She observed the screaming panic of an employee, not wanting to die. Angela verbally encouraged that employee to hang on a little longer, as they're almost at the energy refinement quota. So, Angela, you were expecting them to risk dying painfully to meet the energy quota. Yeah. The L Corp recruitment requirements by that point didn't need any specific qualifications or proficiencies. The process of this cycle, this ever repeating play, has clearly ground you down, Angela. On loop 42,484, an employee believed that it was all their fault that a senior killed one of their colleagues the previous day, and they feared that they might end up killing another co-worker on that day. Angela, by that point, just didn't care, due to being desensitized to what she was seeing, along with not being able to do what she wanted, seeing humans as fragile creatures that always make different faces in the same kinds of situations. On loop 71,527, an employee was begging for death, where they considered it better than remaining within that hell. Angela denied that employee a quick death, as she saw them as just another human. Seeing it happen over and over again made what was once disturbing plain and boring to her. She restarted the stage, as it was yet another failure. It was all a delusion to reach the ideal. Cogito was the fuel that was extracted, a fuel extracted using intense emotion created from having lives being threatened both physically and mentally. All this within a hell of perpetual suffering. If I wanted that, I'd be aiming to complete a rhythm game flawlessly, involving all the songs written and performed by ABBA. Anyway, Angela went on to describe that it was a purgatory, repeated by those that have yet to reach enlightenment. In my Lobotomy Corporation law series, I describe this as the cycle of samsara, a cycle that can be broken upon achieving enlightenment, at least according to the teachings of Buddha. She also described it as a heaven where one can try again from the beginning. A heaven that you serve in? If that's what you call it, I can understand why now you ruled in hell. This is based on what you've done and gone through so far. To be honest, I wouldn't call the facility heaven. It's just a different flavor of hell. She knew that the curtain would one day fall on that stage, when the perfect realization was reached and propagated to all of the people. A perfect realization that was eventually achieved. And then sabotaged. She's the one that did all the behind-the-scenes work. She's the one that coordinated the stage so that these scripts wasn't deviated from. She believed that she was paying the price more than the employees. I can understand why she said this, as at least the employees die and it's gotten over with. Well, with them. She has to remember all of this. 10,000 years from the inside perspective. 1,000,000 years from hers. All of that ground down who and what she was and turned her into one seemingly devoid of compassion. Devoid of anything that made Carmen who and what she was. Yeah, that's the woman that Angela was apparently based on. Back in the present, Angela was venting at Yesod, asking if that's where his oh so rational thoughts led him, that he should demonstrate that himself first before lecturing her. They're all standing before her because they were all bark and no bite. Angela, haven't you forgotten? They didn't give up without a fight. In fact, you decided to make a deal with them, considering that for both sides it would be a Pyrrhic victory at best if they kept fighting you. She then asked who he thought paid the price. Did he think that it was him and the others? She certainly didn't think so. She believed that she was the one that paid the dues that he and the others should have. Roland understood that they're practically swimming along the mighty Mississippi at this point, asking Yesod to make sure he's right about this. Unfortunately, he was, as Yesod understood that the library was resonating with Angela's mental state, which, considering that she was using the EGO of the Forsaken Murderer, was not good at all. Roland saw her shape shift like last time, which he considered a pain in the to deal with. Yeah. Now you know how others feel. Although Yesod understood that it won't be like the last time. Roland recognized that as well. And not just due to the different form that she was in, which was quite appropriate. Yesod knew that they needed to prepare for this, as she won't be overly patient with them. The first EGO that Angela wielded during this floor realization was that of the Forsaken Murderer, the Regret EGO, which actually looked quite fitting considering her current situation. She might be stronger than the abnormality when he was first fought, but she also had the same weakness. Status ailments make her less capable of causing any serious damage to the librarians. All of these abnormalities represent Angela's torment regarding her memories of the cycles that she was unable to forget, no matter how much she wanted to. Her hands being tied in a hopeless situation, where she was unable to help employees or save them from death. She was a mere tool for the manager, who was really Ian. Both Yesod and Angela were considered rational. Guilt had an effect on both. The difference was that, as Gabriel, his OCD got so bad after Elia's death that he wanted to claw himself to death, seeing festering flesh where there was none, while Angela got to the point where she simply didn't care due to it happening too many times. More times than she'd want to remember. While Yesod maintained control even during his bad days, well, most of the time anyway, Angela was chained by her own desires and became about as blunt as the Forsaken Murderer when he's in full headbanger mode. As for what this specifically represents, it's based around sacrifice, perhaps how gaining an emotional detachment can come at a heavy cost, a sacrifice of the spirit rather than the material. As for how Angela feels during this, well, she thought about the value that she wasn't allowed, that none felt guilty for her, a machine left to rust alone, lacking the freedom to break free from her constraints. Well, at least as far as she believed, along with holding a belief that she was paying the price of others, while also discarded. Well, considering that AI aren't even second class, that honestly doesn't surprise me. She remarks on how guilt was put out of sight, out of mind, for the bad joke that is the greater good. A concept that is whatever those in charge deem it to be, no matter how morally questionable or insane sounding. She also questioned who tied her, either those that researched or those that they wanted to save. She questioned if there was any regret for what was condoned. She even questioned what she was forced to see. She considered herself to be chained to the resentment and hate of the past. Angela, I think it's more than that which chains you. She recognized that she lost her sense of guilt due to the morbid script written for the purpose of making the treatment of the disease of the mind, which made her numb. They didn't even know what disease they were intending to cure, and at times, she struggles to make a coherent sentence. Yesod was sure that everything would be fine if they could beat some sense out of her and change her back. And now that's a little less subtle than he usually is. Then again, he doesn't really have many other options. As for his assistants, they believe that Yesod was worrying too much, that they've heard of a similar situation on the floor of history, and they can overcome it as well, even though there's a fear that she won't change back, although they're fully alert during this time. After she was defeated the first time, Angela changed to the Grinder Mark IV EGO. And no, it's not a mobile app. It looks like something that Yonder-chan would wear if she was outfitted by Dr. Octopus. This is her second EGO, that of the all-around helper, a cleaning and cooking robot that kills due to Well, likely some vindictive engineer that's, well, someone that's vindictive within that corporation that switched the cooking and cleaning utensils. This one represented Angela's servitude towards Ian. Servitude without any regard for her own desires. And in this battle, she's backed up by the abnormality. Well, a few copies of that abnormality themselves. Each with the focus on bleeding their targets to death. In this form, she believed that a machine must operate as the designer intended. That a machine had to be that way, as those were the principles that were installed in her by Ian. Which sounds strange as the library started due to her saying, "You," to his intentions for her. She then remembered her conversation with Ian about going that far to collect energy and obeying him without question. Then there was something interesting. Something which explained the war that resulted in the AI Ethics Amendment, along with the Green Ordeals, possibly. That also resulted in the perception filter visor technology to reduce the risk of mental breakdown of the troops that fought in that war. And that was the Mechanical Rebellion. Yeah, a Skynet type scenario. As for how the head factored into this, they either took over before this war and never gave their power back. Either that or they took over during this war and held on to that power, having a taste for it. There's also a third possibility of them taking over after. I'm thinking a similar situation to Revenge of the Sith, where liberty died with thunderous applause, as a certain senator would put it. Yeah, her hands were tied regarding orders, so she couldn't refuse them, even if she didn't understand them. She believed that a machine's operation was always precise. Not unless there's a flaw in the design, as it's a mystery if it always works as intended. Yeah, that sounds suspicious. Nothing always works as intended. Also, that a machine has no use for values, that morality is useless when principles are set in stone. Well, when morality is harder to define for humans, machines have less chance to figure it out without getting it wrong. Then she spoke some of her first lines that she said to X before he was revealed as Ian, introducing herself as his AI secretary that's there to assist him, that she can do what would require 12 at once. As for Yesod's perspective of this, he checks on his assistants to make sure that they're fine after what they've been through so far. His assistants were alerted by the all-around helpers spinning and freezing. It's familiar to them, although they're worried about Angela changing form. Yeah, that's less familiar. After this EGO form was defeated, Angela shifted to the Harmony EGO, which is the EGO of the singing machine. This form appears to be largely black leather. She also wields a banjo that has power, and a bear in yellow shorts is not needed in this case to unlock it. She is assisted by the singing machine abnormality and addicted employees. This EGO form represents the sacrifice in blood that the facility demanded of its employees, what was needed to get the energy that was part of the seed of light. In this form, Angela didn't care about the price, as it was the result that mattered. The ends justify the means, no matter how gruesome the process. Yeah. Roland has said that as well. And he wasn't any more convincing. She also believed that to satisfy others, the despair and suffering of a few are needed to make that product. The hope of many, at the cost of sending a few to the despair of hell. The greater good? Sorry, I almost vomited. She doesn't want the others to stop performing until the body turns to dust, just to bring her the satisfaction that she'll never get. She recalled her painful question regarding the pain of others. She also focused on the melody made by horrible measures. Apparently, the sacrifice of others was taken for granted. So, immediate satisfaction needed to be gained. If life is worthless to you, is it really a sacrifice, especially if their deaths were a personal desire? She sees that one's trash misfortune as another's treasured bliss. Yeah, what some throw away is what some salvage for what they might need to survive. She wants to hear whatever she wants to hear. The usual ideal melody. Yeah. She doesn't have a monopoly on self-deceit. As for what Yesod thought, he was concerned about when Angela would come back to her senses, hoping that it would be quick. Largely so that they can talk about what happened. Yeah, the battle was drawn out. In fact, it was in the middle of it. As for his assistants, they're interested in understanding her issues, knowing that she feels lost, even though they're not much better. Well, it's better to face it than hide from it. After this form is defeated, Angela shifts into something that wouldn't be out of place in either the hands of a demon hunter or a pole dancing witch. the solemn lament EGO. The EGO of the funeral of the dead butterflies, which are a couple of guns, one black and one white, that the workshops could only dream of making, largely because it'd be illegal to make firearms that effective. In the facility, they either tax the mind or both the mind and body. In the library, they will always outgun any attempt to defend against them. Not all of the shots can be defended against, at least not easily. This represents the grief concerning that the employees couldn't leave the facility, even in death, largely because it would invite questions that certain individuals would rather not be asked. Questions that might result in that wing being destroyed. I know it's a suspicion, but wings have been destroyed for less than what the Lobotomy Corporation was attacked for. In this form, Angela, in her black and white suited glory, I use that term loosely, remembered what the abnormality said about the coffin being part of a memory of an empty faith, one that's simply too small to comfort the sacrifices of others, innocent as they are. The coffin containing butterflies, which are surprisingly too heavy to carry. She commented that those that died lacked the hope that they had when they arrived. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Yeah, I'm aware of that. She used to be sick of seeing more death. She awaited the end that must exist. She continually questioned what she and the others did wrong. Impurity being something that she considered intolerable for those that mourned. That tears that were showy wetted the wings. Yeah, wetted the wings of the butterflies. As for Yesod, he wasn't sure about the morality of the situation. It's more about how it's accepted. His assistants focused on the battle, how understanding and forgiveness can vary from person to person, and that not everyone will understand what Angela did, and that she might have had no other choice. Does anyone in that city? Well, some of them did. And yet, they chose the option that's morally questionable at best, anyway. Well, I say at best. At worst, it's outright immoral. Yeah, there are a few things that are. It's just not always easy to determine. Anyway, let's move on. Upon her defeat in this form, Angela changed into the magic bullet EGO. Yes, the EGO of Der Freischütz, wielding a powerful rifle. This wasn't fought before in the library. There are a couple of comparisons that I can make with this. This is either a cosplay of a Ghost Rider, or a gender bent of one of the spawn of the Dark Knight Sparda. Yeah, there's certainly some resemblance with that second one. As for the abnormality, he was a hunter that received an infernal gun after signing a contract, making a deal with the devil, where the bullets can kill anything that it's aimed at, where the seventh bullet would shoot the one that he cared about. Yeah. The one that he cared about the most would be shot in the head. This weapon corrupted him, and he turned into a devil himself. Der Freischutz represented Angela's grief over death in regards to her desire to prevent it, and yet she was incapable of doing so. How good intentions would lead to bad actions. Armed with that infernal rifle, the technological science team, though injured, knew they had to keep going. As for how she fought during this, she could no longer see Ayn, the one that made her what she was, regardless of whether or not she wanted to. She also became trigger happy, hoping that the bullet would hit her desired target. The bullets were accurate. Her despaired heart could only burn with a cold fire. She had the perspective that it can be a righteous deed that she did. Either that or a blood-stained atrocity. She let none stand in her way. She felt that she would fall to the pits of hell after there was nothing to aim for. She questioned if the devil wished for despair. Her personal devil being Ayn. She was left alone there, underground, realizing that the bullet was meant for no one else but her. A bullet that she would step out of the way, as she would not sacrifice herself for anyone anymore. Yesod understood that this was the end, encouraging his team into finishing this fight. His assistants remembered how indiscriminating the unstoppable bullet could be, either through the abnormality or the weapon EGO. Knowing that it flew in a straight line, they focused on the task of finishing what was started, even though it was harder to endure. Certainly with what they were getting shot at with. Even after Angela was fully subdued, partially due to the seventh bullets shooting her, Roland was still shaken by what happened during that full realization. Angela then snapped out of it. She didn't see her latest group therapy session as good, as she kept doing that. Yesod responded by asking her if she's come to her senses. She told them that she is, and it's irritating to be that sober. Well, if you want to remedy that, you can always go to the floor of art. Nezhak can hook you up with some booze. Roland can speak from personal experience regarding that. Yeah, he has some memories of drinking and doing nasty stuff. That which remains coming back in the morning and asking, why the did I shove a flagpole right up that fug's while writing, capture this? Well, that's one example I can think of. As for whether or not he did something like that, it's unconfirmed. Although Yesod understood this in the same way as I do, at least in regards to the flaw realizations, that it allowed her to vent out her feelings. Angela, being the tsundere that she is, denied this, telling him not to talk like he knows everything. He might have encased himself in compulsion out of his own choice, but she couldn't act according to her own will. Angela, that was then, this is now. Although Yesod didn't mean to offend her and asked her if she could make her own choices. Yeah, what's your excuse now? Yesod, speaking on behalf of the others, is even offering to help her as much as she helps them by paying all the price in their stead. She doesn't believe that she had a choice even at that point. She sees the goal that she intends to reach as clear and apparent. She says that she's not doing this because she wants to. It's simply what she must do, searching for the one book that would complete her and the library, all because she's obligated to. Now this reeks of a load of self-deceit and flat-out lies. She's the one giving the orders this time. Well, if it's not you, Angela, who is it? You're doing things in an almost identical manner to your father. And this time, you're the one writing the scripts. As for what Yesod thinks, well, what he believes, or rather what he doesn't believe, he doesn't believe that there is such a thing as what you simply must do, as everything changes constantly, where it's not necessarily rational or wise to blindly follow a goal determined in the past. To keep up with rapid changes that the world goes through, discretion needs to be maintained at all times. Angela said that what he was saying was sensible, but in a rather dismissive tone, even asking if he understands the meaning of his own words. Roland noticed this, and was leaning more towards Yesod's side regarding this. That Yesod and the others were doing their best to help her. She then believed that gratitude was what they wanted and told them that she appreciated their help. But the way she was saying that reeks of lip service, as in, she didn't say it like she was meaning it. Well, this would certainly be the case considering that she disappeared abruptly. Yesod believed that Angela was changing, and that Roland was playing a role in that. Roland noticed that she was more talkative than before. As for her personality and how it's playing out, he's not sure that it's changing for the better. As for Roland, Yesod asked about any changes on his part. Roland didn't experience any, considering it a bit late for that. Well, regardless, whatever issues that Angela has yet to resolve, it's likely to take more than 2 group therapy sessions to work her way through them. The next guest group that the library would usher in would be more conventional in its brutality. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!